Last week, as we covered here on Rising, the Daily Poster exposed the big pharma ties of the three Democrats responsible for blocking a bill that would allow the federal government to negotiate drug prices under Medicare. Now, those representatives are trying to justify their break with the rest of their party, as well as respond to allegations of corruption. Scott Peters justified his actions, saying, quote, "I'm not going to unilaterally disarm and defund my campaign so that Republicans can win. I just think that's a dumb thing to do. I aim to win races, and I'm totally in favor of changing the rules. I will play the rules that apply, and when they change, I'll play by those rules." Here to discuss is the founder of the Daily Poster, editor-at-large at Jacobin, and former senior advisor to the Bernie Sanders campaign, David Sirota. Welcome, David.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
The Peters argument is kind of standard fare in some ways when these allegations are made, that I'm not going to unilaterally disarm. You hear that from Democrats all the time. His extra twist is the use of the word defund. I'm not going to defund my campaign, which is an implicit acknowledgement that losing this corporate money would defund his campaign.
Absolutely. And let's remember, Scott Peters is the #1 recipient of pharmaceutical industry money in the entire United States House right now in this election cycle. So you're right. He's kind of screaming the quiet part out loud. He can't seem to imagine a decently resourced, winnable campaign unless he is raking in an enormous amount of pharmaceutical industry money, money that sure looks like it has translated into a vote to help the pharmaceutical industry that is funding his campaign. In other words, he can't conceive of another way of raising the resources necessary to run a campaign. That's what he's really admitting. And, in some ways, it's an honest admission. It's an admission of how politics has come to work for many members of Congress. Now, there's a different fundraising model that's out there in recent years where it's a much more grassroots fundraising model, no PAC money fundraising model. But there are still large portions of American politics where it's the old school money machine, where you are literally relying on industry money, money from corporate forces that are asking you for specific legislative favors.
Yeah, I'm almost stunned that he was so direct and honest in his statement. I mean, I probably, if I were advising him, would have spun it to say, listen, I'm not beholden to who I take money for. I'm open to who, I might accept contributions from, but it's not going to influence my votes. Didn't quite go that route. But David, let me ask you this. With regard to the drug pricing considerations in the House, and I know it's been a priority of the Biden administration, what do you see as the path to victory? Is this something where, is there enough support among progressives that something can get done?
Well, look, it's a wildly popular issue, the proposal itself in polls to allow Medicare to use its bulk purchasing power to negotiate lower prices. It's something, by the way, that the Veterans Administration does, other countries do, so it's hardly some radical idea. The Democrats have been campaigning on it for many, many years. So I think what you're going to probably end up seeing is some version of this put back into the House version of the reconciliation bill, and the Senate will have its own version of that negotiation provision, and then there will be some sort of amalgam of the two. And of course, the problem there is that the pharmaceutical industry, I can say this having worked on the Hill, worked against them when I worked on the Hill, they are very good at making sure the details of legislation serve them. That all you have to do on many of these issues is tweak a couple of words, change a shall to a may, and you can change the entire meaning of legislation. So the key is going to be watching the actual specific language that's ultimately put in to see if it does what it says it's going to do, to see if it does what Democrats are promising that it will do. Because what you could end up having is a situation where Democrats say, hey, look, we got this provision in, we passed something, and it doesn't end up actually reducing drug prices because this or that word in the final legislation was tweaked in such a way as to serve the pharmaceutical industry.
And what's interesting here, and I'd like to get your take on this, is that Pharma and the Democrats don't exactly have conflicting interests here. The Democrats have two interests. They want to make good on their main campaign promise of the last two cycles, which was, they're going to protect people with pre-existing conditions. Okay, they've done that. They haven't repealed Obamacare. And they're going to lower drug prices. Like, those were their only basic promises that they made. And they made those promises specifically to crowd out Medicare for all. DCCC introduced a ton of polling saying, like, look, this is the way to go. Don't do the Medicare for all, do this. So now that they've done this and they've run so many ads around this, they have an interest in actually making that happen. Their second interest is getting a big CBO score. And for people that don't know what a CBO score is, let's say if the Congressional Budget Office tells you that it saves $700 billion over 10 years to do this particular provision, okay, now you have $700 billion that you can then spend on child tax credits, or whatever it is on the spending side that you want to do. We're not talking about modern monetary theory here. We're just saying that this is the procedure that you need to do in order to get this through reconciliation. So in other words, neither of those interests have anything to do with actually seeing drug prices driven down. So if there's some in-between ground where Democrats can say they lowered prices by passing this provision, can get the CBO to agree that it might happen over the next 10 years, but that it doesn't actually do it, then you could see Pharma signing off on it, and that all exists in the gray area of those details. Do you think that the scenario I'm kind of laying out here is where this is headed?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the key to understanding it is to watch how Pharma reacts. I mean, I always use this metaphor. When I used to go to a baseball game with my dad would say, when the pitch is thrown, don't watch the ball, watch the outfielder. In other words, don't watch the ball when the ball goes into the outfield. It's hard to know where it's going, but the outfielder will tell you, watching them will tell you where things are going. It's the same kind of concept in politics. Don't necessarily watch what the politicians are saying. Watch what the opponents are doing. So if pharma lobbyists, the pharmaceutical industry is saying, all of a sudden, if you see that happen and they say, the pharmaceutical lobby says, hey, this is okay with us, that's not necessarily a good sign for the cause of reducing prescription drug prices. That may be the tell that what they ended up doing was watering down the legislation in a way that allows the Democrats to have a press release saying they did something, but it won't actually drive down prices. And the political problem then becomes, in my view, that if the Democrats don't actually deliver material gains for working people, that no matter how many nice press releases are put out, it will still be a political problem for them. That at the end of the day, people will be asking, am I actually saving money on my health care bills? And if I'm not, and if the Democrats are telling me I am, but I'm not, that creates the conditions potentially for a kind of electoral and political backlash.
Excellent analogy.
And then they'll have to run more ads saying that they're going to really reduce drug prices next time. David, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And we'll have more Rising right after this.